Claire hadn't planned to fall for Luke. Not really. It started slowly, the way real feelings often do. A conversation at a bookstore in Portland, Oregon, over the last copy of a novel they both claimed to love but hadn't actually read. From there, it turned into shared coffees after work, walks through rainy streets, the kind of late-night texts that linger in your mind long after the conversation ends. For Claire, it was the way Luke listened. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were thoughtful, almost careful. He had this calm presence that made her feel like the world wasn't spinning so fast. So when he texted her on a cool Friday afternoon, "Come over tonight, just the two of us. I miss you." Her heart did something it hadn't done in a while. It fluttered, not with the giddy nerves of a crush, but with the warm ache of someone starting to hope. Claire took her time getting ready. She didn't want to overdress. It wasn't that kind of night, but it wasn't nothing either. She slipped into soft denim and her favorite navy blue sweater, the one Luke had once said matched her eyes when the light hit just right. She added a bit of gloss, ran her fingers through her hair, and checked her reflection one last time before grabbing her keys. It wasn't about looking perfect. It was about feeling like herself, the version of herself she wanted him to really see. The air was crisp when she pulled into his quiet street just outside of Seattle. She liked his place. It was simple, lived in, with just enough personality. Records stacked beside the old turntable, books piled in every corner, the scent of cedar, and something faintly masculine lingering in the hallway. Tonight was supposed to be one of those slow, close nights. No restaurants, no distractions, just wine, maybe music, and long conversations about everything and nothing. Claire was ready for that kind of intimacy, the kind where silence isn't awkward, just comfortable. But the moment she stepped inside, something shifted. Laughter spilled from the living room. Deep, loud, and unexpected. 3 men sat around, the coffee table, beers in hand, joking over a half-started game of cards. Claire blinked, thrown. Then Luke appeared from the kitchen, his face caught between surprise and guilt. "Hey," he said with a half-smile. "I didn't think you'd mind if a couple of my buddies dropped by. They were already out and, figured we could all hang." She tried to smile. Really, she did. Claire was raised polite, Midwest heart, Canadian patience, but inside, her chest tightened. It wasn't the presence of other people. It was the absence of what she had expected, what he had promised. She had dressed for something slower, softer, something that felt like a quiet commitment in progress. And now she was standing in a room full of strangers, holding a jacket she suddenly wished she hadn't worn at all. She gave a small wave, murmured, "Hey," and sat on the edge of the couch. Luke didn't sit beside her. He grabbed a beer and slid into the middle of the group like it was any other Friday. And maybe for him it was. But for Claire, this night had meant more. Or at least it was supposed to. As the room buzzed with laughter and conversation that didn't include her, Claire sat quietly, letting her eyes scan the room, but not really seeing anything. Not the movie that had started playing, not the loud friend who laughed too hard, not the one glued to his phone. Her mind stayed on the text he sent. Just the two of us. "I miss you." And yet here she was. One girl in a room full of men. But somehow still feeling completely alone. Claire stayed seated on the edge of the couch, her legs crossed tightly, hands folded in her lap like a guest who wasn't sure if she belonged. Around her, the noise filled every corner of the room, Josh laughing a little too loud, Dylan barely acknowledging her presence as he scrolled through his phone, and Evan, the quiet one, watching her with eyes that seemed to notice everything. Luke was somewhere in the middle, physically and emotionally. He cracked jokes with his friends, commented on the movie, sipped his beer like it was just another Friday. And maybe to him, it was. But to Claire, this night had been something she'd looked forward to all week. It was supposed to be their night. A chance to go deeper. A chance to just be alone and figure out what this almost relationship really meant. Instead, she sat between voices she didn't recognize and energy she didn't ask for. She smiled when someone looked her way, nodded at jokes she didn't find funny, but inside, she was miles away. Not angry, not even hurt in a dramatic sense, just quietly disappointed. And that kind of emotion always sits deeper, because it's not loud. It's not explosive. It just lingers, soft and aching. Luke glanced at her now and then, but not in the way she wanted. Not like a man who invited a woman over because he missed her. Not like someone who was proud to have her by his side. She was background, decor in a scene he hadn't planned for her to be the center of. She started to wonder if maybe she had misread all the late-night texts, the quiet walks, the lingering looks. Maybe this meant more to her than it did to him. Then there was Evan. Of all the guys, he was the one who really saw her that night. Not in a flirty or overstepping way, but in a respectful, kind sort of way that felt rare. He asked if she wanted water. He noticed when she shivered a little and offered her the blanket draped over the armrest. At one point, when the others were caught up in the movie, he leaned toward her and whispered, "You were expecting a quiet night, huh?" She gave a half laugh and nodded. There was nothing else to say. But his voice had warmth in it, a kind of empathy that felt safe. Luke returned from the kitchen with a bowl of popcorn, placing it in the middle of the group like this had all been part of the plan. He handed Claire a drink, then sat down again, between his friends, not next to her. The movie kept going. The night kept slipping away. And Claire sat there, realizing how lonely it feels to sit beside someone who doesn't see you the way you hoped they would. She tried to tell herself not to overthink, that maybe this was just a misunderstanding, but deep down she already knew. She didn't need him to say it out loud. She felt it. Still, she stayed. Not because she wanted to, but because walking out felt like admitting something too soon. So instead, she watched the movie, pretending to care, all while quietly wondering how a night that was meant to feel so special had turned into one that made her feel invisible. She caught Evan glancing at her again, concern in his eyes. She gave him a small, polite smile. Because sometimes, the kindest people in the room aren't the ones you came to see. And sometimes, heartbreak doesn't come with shouting. It comes with silence. The kind that sits beside you and slowly steals the warmth from the night. Claire stood up quietly and slipped out of the noisy living room, her heart pounding with a strange mix of emotion she couldn't name just yet. The kitchen lights were softer, warmer, and the quiet that met her there felt like a kind of relief. She leaned against the counter, her fingers brushing the edge of the sink, and took a long, steady breath. It wasn't that Luke had done something awful. He hadn't lied or yelled or hurt her. But sometimes the worst feeling is realizing someone doesn't see the same future you do. She'd come tonight hoping for something real. Connection, intimacy, maybe even clarity. Instead, she felt like a forgotten thought in a night she was supposed to be the center of. She wasn't asking for grand gestures. She never did. All Claire had ever wanted was effort, intention, something to say, "You matter to me." But that room full of laughter, those loud jokes and easy comfort between him and his friends, made her feel like a background character in her own story. A few moments later, Luke walked into the kitchen, holding 2 beers and wearing a crooked, uncertain smile. "Hey," he said softly, like he already knew something was wrong but wasn't ready to face it. "You okay?" Claire turned to him slowly, arms still folded across her chest. She looked at him, not just at his face, but at everything they'd become. "I thought it was just going to be us tonight," she said, her voice calm but edged with the kind of disappointment that only comes from caring too much. Luke hesitated, then shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. "I didn't think it would matter. They were already out. I figured you wouldn't mind." He took a sip of his drink, avoiding her eyes. Claire nodded, her heart sinking just a little more. "It's not about your friends," she said gently. "It's about what you said. You told me you missed me. You made it sound like tonight was about us." Luke's expression shifted, part regret, part discomfort. "I like you, Claire," he said, quieter now, like it hurt to admit. "I really do. But I didn't think we were at that point. Not serious. Not yet." His words were simple, but they landed like bricks in her chest. Claire looked down, blinked away the sting behind her eyes, and nodded. Of course. That was the truth. She wanted something he wasn't ready to give. And in that moment, it wasn't anger she felt. It was clarity. She had been holding on to a version of him in her head, a version where they were both leaning in at the same pace, but now she could see it. He was still halfway out the door, unsure if he wanted to step all the way in. Before she could say anything else, a voice floated in from the hallway. Evans. "Claire? You okay?" There was a pause. She glanced toward the door, surprised. Luke looked confused, maybe a little bothered. But Claire didn't answer right away. Instead, she let herself feel the moment, the difference between the man she came for and the one who noticed she left the room. "Yeah," she called back softly. "Just breathing." Luke turned back toward the living room, and Claire stayed in the kitchen a little longer, feeling the silence settle in her chest like a truth she didn't want but needed to hear. The connection she longed for wasn't in that house, not in the couch laughter or the empty apologies. It was somewhere else, waiting, maybe in a quieter voice, a softer gaze. And sometimes, the most important thing a heart can do is stop, pretending it's being held when it's really just being tolerated. The night ended sooner than anyone expected, though no one really said why. Claire slipped on her jacket quietly, avoiding the eyes of the other guys as they half watched the movie, half scrolled through their phones. Luke didn't follow her to the door. He stayed on the couch, beer in hand, as if unsure how to handle the space between them now. Claire didn't expect him to say anything grand. She already knew where they stood. Sometimes, it's not the words that hurt, but the ones that never come. She pulled the door closed behind her and stepped into the cool night, the air brisk, against her cheeks and grounding in a way she hadn't felt all evening. But just as she reached her car, a voice called out softly behind her. "Claire, wait." She turned around, expecting Luke, but it was Evan. Quiet, thoughtful Evan, with his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets and something honest in his eyes. He walked up slowly, careful not to invade her space, like he could tell she was still holding the weight of a letdown she hadn't fully unpacked yet. "You deserved that night," he said, his voice low, warm. "Just the two of you. You shouldn't have had to pretend like you were okay with how it turned out." Claire looked at him, surprised, not just at what he said, but how he said it. Not many people notice those kinds of things. But Evan had noticed everything. The way she'd stayed quiet, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, the way she kept glancing at Luke, hoping for something that never came. "It's okay," she said softly, almost more to herself than to him. "It told me what I needed to know." The wind picked up slightly, rustling her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear, her fingers brushing her cheek. She wasn't angry anymore, just tired, disappointed, yes, but also free in a strange, unexpected way. Evan didn't push. He just nodded, understanding in his expression. "If you ever want a real quiet night," he said gently, like, actually quiet, the kind where someone listens, where there's no pretending, you know, I'd be around. He didn't smile too much or try to charm her. He just offered the kind of honesty that felt rare. Claire blinked, unsure how to respond at first. Her heart, still raw from the shift with Luke, wasn't ready for anything new. But something about Evan's presence didn't feel like pressure. It felt like safety. "That sounds nice," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I might take you up on it." They stood there for a few more seconds, neither in a rush to fill the silence. And that alone made her feel more seen than anything that happened inside that house. When Claire finally opened her car door and slid in, she glanced back once. Evan was still standing there, watching to make sure she got in safely, hands still tucked into his pockets, heart wide open in his quiet way. And as she drove away, something inside her shifted. She hadn't found what she came looking for, but maybe, just maybe, she had stumbled into something more meaningful. Because love doesn't always arrive with fireworks or big declarations. Sometimes it shows up gently, in the eyes of someone who notices the moment you begin to shrink, and softly reminds you that you deserve to take up space. That night didn't go the way Claire imagined, but it gave her something better than answers. It gave her clarity, and a chance perhaps at a love that wouldn't need to be chased, but simply returned. Subscribe to Echo Tales for more heartfelt, romantic stories that stay with you. If this story touched something in you, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your next love story might be closer than you think.